Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats.
Now, even 20 years later, it's more important than ever that we never forget. And if you're within the sound of my voice, that must mean you are in the seats with once more. As always, my name is Dave Voigt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we sit down with a wide-ranging variety of industry professionals and pick their brain about current projects, state of the industry, how they got started, and so very much more in a light and conversational fashion. And I mean, if you like how we do things around here, and I'm assuming you do, because you're listening to my voice right now, you can subscribe to the podcast. You can find us over at Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google, basically wherever you get your podcasts. And plus, we archive every single one of our episodes over at our In the Seats YouTube channel, so if you can give us a like and subscribe there too, I'd really appreciate it. Also, please check us out on the social media. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at either at In the Seats or at It's Podcast One for all sorts of updates. And finally, and I'm a broken record, but I say it, it's true. Please visit us at In the Seats. It's most importantly, come to the site, check out what we have to say on all the latest and greatest from cinema across the world, television, basically the moving image in general. Because that's what we love to write about and talk about, and we love it when you come by and read about it. So please, dear God, come stop on by. On this episode, well, we're getting a little solemn, but it is the anniversary of 9/11. It did just pass a few days ago. And we are talking about a powerful documentary called Florian Nights from filmmaker Panayioti Yannitsos. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But it's about the honor and bravery. It's about first responders and just how they're dealing with the issues around PTSD and some things that have come up around that. It's a little shocking, but also it's a little inspiring. It's inspiring too. I mean, it's an important story to have out there, and it's kind of amazing to see what so many of these first responders are having to go through, because they have found ways, some of them at least, have found ways to cope with their PTSD, but it's in a way that is almost making them adversarial to a lot of their other first responders, which is, I don't want to spoil it, but it's really an interesting film. And we talked with Panayioti, and we talked with one of the subjects in the film, Bill Shokar, who is a first responder himself, just about telling this story and telling it the right way, and getting the story out there and understanding what so many of their first responders are going through. And it's in film. It's starting in films in theaters across North America, and it is rolling out across various cities and touring around. And it's also going to hit video on demand and Blu-ray and DVD this coming November, probably around Thanksgiving for our friends in the States. November 23rd, I believe the right day is. But please check out this film, because I think it's an important one to see. But more importantly, enjoy our talk with Panayioti and with Bill, because it was a good one. All right. Well, obviously, thanks for the time today, guys. I really appreciate this.
My pleasure.
No worries.
Thanks for having us.
Now, I guess, Pan, my first question is for you. Like, walk me through sort of the inspiration to want to tell this story.
Yeah, well, this story was brought to me by our executive producer, Sean Galveo, who had a production company based out of Vancouver. And he had mentioned to me that there was a motorcycle club of active and retired firefighters that had popped up in our neighborhood, and that these guys ride as a coping strategy for some of the mental stress that they have gone through on the job. And I thought, well, this is a really great story, Sean. Let's talk about this. And he said, well, actually, they're opening up a second chapter of the club in New York City with the fire department of New York, members of the fire department of New York. And I thought, well, that's one of the more recognizable club or fire departments in the world. I like this. And then he goes, well, they're going in 2 weeks, so we got to start filming in 2 weeks. And I go, man, that's not how this works. I go, I don't know. I haven't had time to research. I got to hire a key creatives. We got to, go through the process. And so I left that meeting and I told him, I said, I'm not so sure I could do this at this time. And then I hop into traffic, and lo and behold, retired battalion chief Rod McDonald, who's also a member of the Florian's Knights Motorcycle Club, is right in front of me in traffic wearing his Florian's Knights patch. And so I'm staring at this thing in about 30 minutes of traffic, contemplating, do I do this movie or not? So it was kind of a little serendipitous event, running into one of the members in traffic, that I decided to take on the movie. I pulled together a crew in 2 weeks, and it's been 3.5 years, and here we are. So
fantastic. Now, I mean, Bill, I guess my next question is for you. Like, can you walk me through, I guess, maybe sort of some of the origins of the group, or just why motorcycle riding as opposed to anything else? Why was it that was sort of everyone seemed to sort of latch on to?
Well, it's going to be difficult to top Pan's story. I didn't even know that story. I think that's just so crazy that would have happened, that you ran into Roddy on the street. But in terms of why motorcycles, that's a great question. I just think it's the common thread that kind of brought us all together. I was riding independently, like a lot of the guys were, and they all kind of banded together. And just through some common friends, they knew that I was riding. And one of the guys from the group reached out to me and just sort of mentioned to me what the vision was, and sort of what the plan and mission was for the group, and thought I might be interested. And then as I got to know them a little bit better, and they're a bit of a backstory, and everybody has a story, and the science has shown after so many years on the job, you do end up carrying lots of baggage, and the baggage comes out in many different ways. And that baggage now, can turn into PTSD. So it just resonated with me, and I joined the group, and we were off to the races, as they say.
Can you both talk to me a little bit just about, I guess, looking more into the science of it all? Because, I mean, as an outsider looking in, when people say PTSD, they think war, but when you really sort of let it sit with you for a minute, no, for first responders and all that, it makes absolute sense. Can you talk me through, I guess, sort of the research that you had to do to sort of really dive into the subject properly?
Well, I'll go first real quickly, and then I'll let Pan jump in. People ask me a similar question all the time, and I kind of use layman's terms, sort of a sports analogy, and I've said this before. It starts off with workplace stress. Workplace stress can be considered any type of common injury. However, if you don't manage that injury and heal it, over time, that injury becomes chronic, and then it becomes arthritic. And you can almost kind of say, metaphorically speaking, when it becomes arthritic, now you have PTSD, and it becomes a far bigger issue, far more difficult to manage. Possibly takes much longer to overcome the challenges. So, I think the science has proven that. The science has basically proven what people have known, and they just couldn't put a word to it. And again, after World War II, there was far less PTSD, and there was far less suicides than after the Vietnam War, as an example. And some of the science has shown it's because after the World Wars, they had time to decompress, to travel back to their home countries. The guys that were out there on the front lines had a lot more time to share their stories and help each other heal. Whereas opposed to, in the Vietnam War, 1 week you're on the battlefield, and 2 weeks later you're walking down the grocery aisle buying groceries. It just, you didn't have that time or means to be able to decompress and share your stories and help each other heal. And I think riding bikes together certainly does that. And I'll let Pan jump in on that.
Yeah, I think, well, the interesting thing for me as it pertains to the fire department, something I didn't know. So I came in knowing that, I understood that somebody might have one event throughout their career that might trigger something, right? That memorable event that might haunt them. But what we found as we were filming is that, there was something called cumulative stress, and that is that if you're in the downtown east side of Vancouver, and on a Wednesday, you're responding to, 16 or 24 overdoses in a shift. What happens if you continually do that over the next year? For some guys back, maybe 20 years ago, they wouldn't have had the opportunity to, maybe, leave that fire hall. Nowadays, for example, in the downtown east side of Vancouver, you can only do a year at that hall, because of the call volume and because of what you're seeing on a daily basis. But that wasn't the case, decades ago, right? Guys might be faced with these types of call volumes over, years and years. And we've come to know guys who have had 35-year careers. So that cumulative stress, I think, really builds up. And as Bill mentioned, you build this arthritic kind of environment. And then, guys start to self-medicate. We've seen suicide, we've seen self-medication with alcohol. We've seen, even if it's just the way they might be at home, right, with their families. This was all kind of brought to the table during my time. And the most interesting thing from a research standpoint is when I went to go find figures as to, okay, how many members within the fire department have symptoms of post-traumatic stress injuries or PTSD? I was seeing figures like anywhere between 7 and 37%, right? So like there's this 30% disparity as to, well, how much is it? Is it 7 or is it 37, right? I mean, if it's 37, that's significant. And then I started to realize it actually might be even higher than that, than the highest estimation. And I thought there's a real gap here. And what I hope this film does is try to fill in some of those gaps.
Now, I'm curious because, I mean, obviously it's sensitive subject matter. Like, how did you, Pan, sort of start to engender trust and get people to want to talk? Because, I mean, as it said very eloquently in the film, these aren't necessarily issues that you're supposed to want to talk about, but they're so important that you have to talk about.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think we had two wheels, man. We had the motorcycle. We had that shared interest with all of our firefighters in healing. And so I came in through the lens of healing. And then it was a transition of, well, if we're going to talk about the healing, then we need to talk about the trauma so audiences can see that journey. And that, I think firefighters began to open up. So, I think on the topic of, we had the motorcycle, and what was really interesting about that is guys were more willing to open up about the darkness because we were here to raise awareness for the light, which was wind therapy. And coming in with that as kind of a bit of a Trojan horse, which is that, we're coming in through the lens of healing, and this is going to be a positive conversation. And then, well, if we're going to talk about the lens of healing, we have to open up as to what are we healing from. And that's where I was able to get senior members of some of the most historic fire departments in the world to open up about things that they hadn't opened up about in their 35-year careers. So because of the motorcycle, we were able to do something that I don't think any production team has ever done with fire departments across North America.
Anything to add to that, Bill?
Yeah, I think that was spot on. And just from someone coming from the other perspective of, how did we build that trust with Pan and his crew? It wasn't that difficult at all, because I think the original guys in Vancouver that started the group, we were at a stage where, we wanted to share just our own experiences, first and foremost, to help ourselves move forward. And secondly, to help others that might be feeling same or similar, just to give them a sense of normalcy. And what we really got a sense from Pan and his team was, they're storytellers. They wanted to tell our story without any judgment, without actually too many filters. And it seemed really seamless to us to be able to have someone kind of believe in what we were thinking and feeling, and some of our sentiments. And I think it worked out really well. And I think they did a phenomenal job. The story is right there on the big screen, and they did a great job of capturing a lot of the challenges that frontline first responders, firefighters face, irrespective of whether it's a big department or a small department. It only takes that one call. That's the thing. There is an element of an accumulation, absolutely. But if you go to a call with, like with an infant death, and you have an infant at home, I mean, that's all it can take.
For sure.
To get injured. But because the injury is not visible, it's a lot more difficult to try and convince people that you are injured. And that's, the energy that should go into healing, unfortunately, too often goes into trying to convince people, no, really, I am not well. And then, as Pan mentioned earlier, if you fall on deaf ears, then a lot of members historically turn to other means to try and either self-medicate or to prove, no, really, I am hurting, and I'm going to show you how badly I am hurting.
Now, I mean, just to spin off that a little bit, I mean, there is something else in the film that really shocked me. And I was so surprised just on the pushback because, I mean, again, as somebody on the outside looking in, when I think first responder, firefighter, police, what have you, it's the same. But because of the way the jacket's designed and you're wearing a leather jacket and you're on a motorcycle, things change and there's this complete pushback. Can you talk a little bit just about, I guess, the origins of that? But also, it almost feels to me that having a common goal together while you're riding against the pushback almost feels like it's part of the healing as well, to have someone to go have sort of a united sort of front who's sort of pushing against you, if that makes any sense.
It does make some sense for sure. It really bonds people when it becomes kind of an us versus them type of scenario. And we were really taken aback, personally anyways, I can't speak for the other guys, but I for sure was taken aback by the pushback. Simply because, I still see myself as a very, just a normal, law-abiding, quiet citizen that just loves to ride bikes. And what I wear, in my mind, really shouldn't make any difference. But people and society, and we have these social constructs where they're just so hung up on what you look like. And I was totally caught off guard. And unfortunately, it took some of our energy away from our mission and our mandate, so to speak, and then some of the things that we wanted to achieve. And we were able to achieve some of the fundraising goals that we had set, but it really was disruptive. Being stopped by law enforcement on a repeated basis, on a daily basis, and just simply for the reason of, what we look like. I think of it as a uniform almost. We go to work, we wear a uniform. If you go to a golf course, people tend to look the same. You go to a fishing derby, people tend to look the same. You go to a cycling, pedal bikes, everybody kind of dresses the same. Doesn't mean they want to be in the Tour de France. If we ride bikes, it doesn't mean that we're outlaw. It's the uniform that kind of comes with riding a bike. And it sounds very simplistic, but I think that's spot on. And there's elements that try and make it a lot bigger than it is, and try and sort of delve into the darker side of motorcycle riding, the stuff you see in movies, sort of like the folklore side of things.
Yeah.
And that's certainly not what we were about, but we sort of got pushed into that arena. And I think it's depicted in the movie really well.
How has I guess just sort of the general acceptance of PTSD sort of evolved over the years, especially in the first responder department, but also like for you, Pan, as you're seeing and diving into these issues, how has it all sort of evolved and expanded? Because I mean, just after watching the film, I got the sense that while there may still be some hesitancy to talk about some of these issues, it's understood universally that it's important to talk about some of these issues.
Yeah, for sure. I think the timing is phenomenal for a film like this. I think that society in general over the past decade, and even we can call it the last 3 to 5 years, have been ready to have this conversation. I think we came to the fire department at the right time. If I were to have tried to make this movie 10 years ago, I just really I'm not certain that we would have had the same results. I think that, now we're approaching the 20th anniversary of 9/11, 9/11 having been a moment where a lot of the public recognized the toll of firefighting and where it can take our, firefighters across the country. And that brought up the issue of mental health. Now, 20 years later, I think there's become a moment where, enough is enough. It's time to have these open conversations. And that's why you saw senior members of these fire departments, Mike Nevin, the former union boss of the Detroit, fire department, opening up, making claims that haven't been spoken publicly before in the history of the department. And now he's doing it not just for a paper or a publication, but he's doing it in front of the camera and he's putting himself out there. I just don't know, would we have seen that 10 years ago? I think the conversation is now, it's very imminent. I think the public's ready. I think, and Bill has talked to me about this before, sometimes the public, they don't want to hear about what goes on outside of the safety bubble. That's an uncomfortable thing, right? They want to dial 911. They want somebody to come and they want someone to respond. They don't necessarily want to know about the call volume and what they saw or the infant deaths or the hangings or they don't necessarily want to hear about that. but we've come to a point where I think society has to come to terms with what is being seen in our communities. And it's changed me fundamentally. I mean, I was one of those guys who just was in the safety bubble and didn't want to have that conversation.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't want to know that, you know, on any given night on the downtown east side, that some individuals are being, you know, brought back to life twice in a shift, you know what I mean, from an overdose. And I didn't necessarily want to, you know, expose those truths to my family, or I didn't want my son to have to deal with that. And so but at some point, for the betterment of these firefighters, it's time to just come clean about what is being seen in our communities. And now how do we grow from that? And how do we learn, and how do we have that conversation that maybe we didn't want to have 10 years ago?
No, for sure. And I mean, it's one of those things where you really get sort of a genuine sense of the job and the stress and the pressure. And I mean, this is a bit of a silly question, but it's something I want to ask you both. Having sort of, you know, lived it and living it and being in the middle of it, I'm kind of curious, because we see these Hollywood recreations of various disasters or events or anything like that. Is there like a firefighter movie or any kind of movie that sort of depicts first responders that has ever come close to getting it right?
You know, none that I can really think of, to be honest. I think simply because it's just too uncomfortable.
Yeah.
I think Pan really nailed it. People want to know, and then they really don't want to know real quick. You know, quite often, I know I'm not the only one. People will, you know, there is a desire to sort of delve into. Nobody knows what happens, you know, behind the closed doors of a firehouse. You know, people are always curious about the job. You know, what do you guys do between calls? Like, what happens in the fire hall? And then it usually leads to, well, you know, what kind of calls do you go to? What's the worst call you ever been to? And you kind of just sort of put it off, you know, but people are still, there's that desire kind of, and then when you start divulging, it's like, okay, you know, I kind of heard enough, you know, that's okay. That's good. That's good. I don't need to hear anymore. And like Pan said, it could be multiple times a shift. We just had a big heat wave come through here in the last month, and I know all the crews where I work went to multiple deaths. And that's just a fact. You know, that's not even sensationalizing. And how that's going to manifest in those people, only time will tell. But the conversation's already started, and that's where I think we've really made some advancements, you know, within our culture and within the fire service, is that those conversations are happening, you know, within the crews. Insofar as people asking for help and getting help, I think that's, you know, where the challenges may lie still. And you know, we're getting better, and I think movies like this will certainly help. Especially when you know, they've gone all over North America, and someone sitting in Detroit can see that someone in New Westminster or someone in Vancouver or someone in New York or Toronto is going through the same thing. It you know, it does normalize it, I think, for sure.
No, I think you're right. And I mean, it's one of those things. And I mean, it even gave me a little bit of a flashback, just because I was at the Raptors parade, so I was there in that sort of throng of humanity. And you know, as much as I was happy they won, it was uncomfortable at the same time, and it was just one of those things where I can't imagine if somebody had to come out and respond in this massive humanity. And it just made me appreciate the job that you do. And I just want to say thank you, Bill, for the work, and thank you, Pan, for making this fantastic film, which I think it really is going to move the conversation in a positive way. And just thank you both for the work, and thank you for the time today.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for having us.
And don't forget to visit our friends over at Bay Street Video for all your DVD, Blu-ray rental, or purchasing needs this summer, as they are still open for curbside and some mailing delivery as well. Over at 1172 Bay Street, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, you can give them a call at 416-964-9088. That's 416-964-9088. Or send them an email at baystreetvideoto@gmail.com for any of your DVD and Blu-ray needs.